When Eddie proposed to me, my mother and I were invited to his parents' house. As soon as we arrived, his parents, barely exchanging pleasantries, started questioning my mother about her background. When she shared that she dropped out of college to have me and raised me alone, Eddie's mother splashed coffee over her head. A mother who didn't even go to college? The engagement's off. After being kicked out of the living room, I realized I'd left my handkerchief behind. Returning with my mom, just as we were about to open the door, I heard Eddie's voice. Compared to Shy, Catherine would be better, right? Her parents and she are all college graduates. Your real preference? She's way better than this current girl. So we're okay with the engagement? I guess we have no choice. Everything went dark before my eyes. My mother flung the door open with force. Entering the living room, my mom, who picked up the handkerchief, glared at Eddie's parents. Well then, I guess I'll just have to ruin your company. As we walked towards the station, my sadness slowly turned into a boiling rage. Just you wait. I'll make you regret ever dumping me. My name is Shy, a 40-year-old housewife. Ever since graduating from college, I've worked nonstop, and before I knew it, I was in my late 30s. I was never really interested in dating. Even as my friends got married one by one, I felt no rush. But then, last year, when a friend visited with her baby, my mother, holding the baby and poking its chubby arms and cheeks, looked so wistfully sad. That's when I realized it. Though she never rushed me, my kind mother had always longed to hold her grandchild. Sometime after that, Eddie joined our company. He seemed to be the heir of a well-known local business. Our boss knew Eddie's father, and Eddie came to work with us for a while to learn the ropes. Tall and gentle, Eddie had the air of someone who had been raised with care. Of course, he caught the attention of the female staff. I wasn't particularly interested in Eddie, but as we worked on projects together, we became friends and had lunch a few times. One day, about half a year later, while eating, I noticed Eddie was eating less than usual and found it odd. Then, he awkwardly asked me, Shy, do you have someone you're seeing? No, I've been all about work and missed my chance to marry. I laughed it off, but Eddie got serious. It's just a lack of opportunity. Anyone as beautiful and capable as you? I was stunned, and Eddie turned red to his neck. Would I be no good? What? I've only had eyes for you these past 6 months. Would you consider dating me? I had developed a fondness for Eddie's serious approach to work. However, since he was 5 years younger, I had never considered him romantically, so his confession took me by surprise. Yet his apparent lack of experience with women touched my heart, and I decided to date Eddie. But once we started dating, I began to feel numerous discomforts. Eddie, seemingly gentle and laid back, turned out to be incredibly indecisive and dependent on his mother. In a restaurant, when it took him over 10 minutes to choose from the menu and he still couldn't decide, he resorted to calling his mother for help. Mom, did you see the picture I sent? Pesto or carbonara? Which should I pick? I can't decide between seafood or meat as the main. What would you do, Mom? And eventually, he would just go with whatever his mother decided. Moreover, as our relationship progressed, Eddie started reporting every detail of our dates to his mother. He would send her pictures of our meals and even our date plans and the time we'd return home. Eddie, you're really close with your mom, huh? I said slightly sarcastically, to which Eddie beamed. In our house, it's a rule to have dinner together as a family. When I have dinner out with you, Mom waits for me with just some snacks and drinks. That's why I always tell her when I'll be home. I thought it unnecessary to report every single destination, but I kept my dissatisfaction to myself. To be honest, until his confession, I hadn't really considered him in a romantic light. But since we started dating, I was increasingly drawn to his kind nature and his friendly smile. Watching him distract fussing children in a store with funny faces, or gently explaining how to use the self-checkout to elderly customers warmed my heart. He was a gentleman, kind, loved children, serious about his work, and admired by colleagues. A perfect future husband.
By the way, what's your curfew, Shy?
Curfew? I almost dropped my fork at his question during dinner. I live alone, so I don't have one. I had a 9 p.m. curfew in high school, but that was lifted once I became an adult.
Ours is 9 p.m.
Wait, you have a curfew? I was astonished, but Eddie just smiled and nodded.
Yeah, so if I work late, I can't go on dates. Let's try to finish work early, okay?
Sure. I forced a smile, hiding my discomfort. Eddie, perhaps unintentionally, sometimes made statements that felt like he was looking down on me. As the heir to a company, Eddie had been cherished by his parents since he was young. He went to a private mission school from kindergarten, following an escalator system through to university, growing up in an environment akin to that of a famous celebrity. His hobbies were piano and violin. Instead of attending cram school, he had private tutors since he was young. No wonder he was so different in demeanor and speech from my male classmates, who went to soccer and swimming classes. Whenever I talked about my childhood, Eddie would narrow his eyes, almost in a mocking way.
I guess you wouldn't get along with your classmates. They seem, not savage, but overly energetic.
Comments like that made me hesitant to open up about my background. I only told him I was raised by a single mother, keeping the details secret from Eddie. I've never known my father. When my mother, still a college student, told her senior she was pregnant, he left school and disappeared. My mother dropped out of college to have me, raising me with help from her family while working tirelessly. I'm proud of my gentle yet strong-willed mother and my background. But with Eddie's vastly different upbringing, I was scared of his reaction and struggled to share my story. Even after we started dating, we kept it a secret at work.
Let's not tell our boss until we're engaged.
But it seems it'll be obvious soon.
I don't want to be teased by colleagues. If someone points it out, then we'll admit it.
Okay, got it. Out of respect for Eddie's feelings, we continued to address each other by our last names at work and made sure not to act too familiar. Naturally, female colleagues, thinking Eddie was single, flocked around him. Most were attracted to his status as the future president, flattering him. It bothered me, but Eddie, being kind, never brushed them off harshly, always responding with a smile. Among them was one female employee who particularly targeted me. Catherine, from the same development team. Catherine, incompetent at her job, was known for buttering up male superiors, which made her unpopular among other women. After Eddie joined, she would sidle up to him with upturned eyes and a sweet voice, frequently touching him. When I pointed out her repeated mistakes, Catherine became visibly upset, making excuses. A little under the weather today. Shy, you really need to help me out more. I've explained it to you multiple times and told you to do the final check, right? Yes, I'll be more careful next time. Even when I complained to Eddie about Catherine's excessive behavior, kind-hearted Eddie just looked troubled.
She's young, you know. We should watch over her with a warm heart.
But she's already 30. And in this job for 7 years? Isn't that too lenient? I thought. Moreover, Catherine started inviting Eddie for lunch frequently, taking advantage of his kindness. When I protested, Eddie responded with annoyance.
She wants to learn about work from me. You have dinner with me, so it's fine, right?
As expected, rumors started that Catherine and Eddie were dating. Yet when asked by colleagues, Eddie gave vague responses and didn't firmly deny it.
Caught on. Actually, I prefer older women.
Frustrated with Catherine playing along with the rumor, Eddie just said,
That kind of girl is a hassle if you provoke her. The rumor will die down eventually. Just ignore it.
It seemed right, but Eddie continued having lunches with Catherine. However, since it was work-related, I had no choice but to keep silent. Despite feeling uneasy, I had to trust Eddie. On our first anniversary, Eddie surprised me with an engagement ring during a lavish dinner. My heart was full with the formal proposal. Thank goodness. Eddie chose me, not Catherine. Tearing up with joy and relief, Eddie shyly said,
I want to introduce you to my parents next time.
Of course I agreed, eagerly awaiting the words. Once parents-in-law approved our marriage, we'd register it and announce it at the company. That should make even the brazen Catherine give up. Before meeting parents-in-law, I first invited Eddie to my mother's house. She already knew about my relationship and the recent proposal, so she happily welcomed Eddie. Sorry for the old, cramped house.
No.
Eddie looked around the old interior with interest, and my mother said apologetically. I had already told her about Eddie's background, so she was probably being considerate. I always hear about you from Shy. You seem really kind. Taking the opportunity, my mother shared with Eddie how she became a single mother. When she revealed that my father disappeared and she dropped out of college to have me, Eddie looked a bit surprised. We spent a pleasant time sipping coffee my mother made. She can be too outspoken, but she's a good, honest girl at heart. Please take care of Shy.
No, Shy is dependable and comfortable to be with.
I saw Eddie off to the station, then returned to my mother's house for dinner. Soon, the day of the family meeting with parents-in-law arrived. Mother and I, dressed in modest dresses, nervously rode in Eddie's car to his parents' house. We walked through the grand gate, along the cobblestone path towards the entrance. We were led into a formal living room. A large garden spread beyond the windows. Sitting opposite parents-in-law, I felt uneasy. Since entering the house, they had been glaring at my mother with piercing eyes. Trying to ease the tension, mother-in-law served coffee, and as I sipped to moisten my throat, father-in-law asked with a stiff face,
Is it true that the highest level of education you completed doesn't include college?
Ah, yes. I got pregnant with her during college and dropped out to raise her alone.
See? Just as Eddie told us.
Oh, yes. Frowning mother-in-law also questioned my mother. So the father ran away, did he? Well, yes, that's right. My mother chuckled bitterly. I bristled inside. What does any of this have to do with Eddie's marriage? I was about to protest when mother-in-law grabbed my mother's cup and threw it on her head. In shock, my mother and I could only stare as mother-in-law ridiculed us. A mother who didn't even go to college? The engagement is off. It would tarnish our family's reputation, she added. Beside mother-in-law, father-in-law nodded, arms crossed, as if it was the most natural conclusion. I looked at Eddie, hoping for support, but he just gave a slight laugh.
If Mom says no, then I guess it can't be helped. Now, please leave.
Overwhelmed by father-in-law's decisive tone, we were stunned as we stepped into the hallway. Behind us, the door snapped shut. My mother and I walked down the corridor, leading to the entrance, eyes fixed on our feet. After a while, my mother spoke softly. I'm sorry, Shy. It's all because of me. Don't be silly. It's not your fault. I was the one who couldn't see through them. That's right. It's better to find out what kind of people they are before getting married. It's frustrating to back down now, but we need to dry your hair. At least the coffee was lukewarm. Oh, I left my handkerchief in the room. It was a lace handkerchief my mother had given me for my birthday. I hated to go back, but there was no guarantee Eddie would return it. As my mother and I were about to open the door, Eddie's voice reached us.
Right. Compared to Shy, Catherine is better, isn't she? Her parents and she both graduated from college. Plus, she's young, so she'll likely have kids soon. As a wife, as well as her parents, should have suitable backgrounds for our family.
father-in-law said, passionately discussing with Eddie, to which mother-in-law reluctantly replied, "The girl you brought last time. You've been dating for 6 months, right? Well, she's much better than the current one."
So, can I get engaged?
"It can't be helped. Let's set a date for the next family meeting."
Lucky you, Eddie. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Everything went dark before my eyes. Wait, was Eddie two-timing me? Was today's family meeting meant to use me as a comparison to get mother-in-law's approval for marrying Catherine? As I stood frozen, my mother burst open the door. Stepping in front of a stunned Eddie and parents-in-law, she knelt to pick up the handkerchief. Standing up, my mother glared at the parents-in-law with fierce eyes and declared in a resonating voice, "Well then, I guess I'll just have to ruin your company."
What?
"Let's go, Shy." I followed my mother as she strode out of Eddie's house. Walking towards the station, sadness turned into a boiling rage. Unforgivable. I won't let this go. Just you wait. I'll make you regret ever dumping me. Despite heading home in a state of seething anger, once I calmed down, anxiety crept in. Eddie was, after all, a colleague in the same department. It would be awkward tomorrow. How should I face him? After a restless night, I went to work the next day, only to be surprised by Eddie greeting me as usual. With his usual affable smile, unconcerned, while I, with my sleep-deprived puffy eyes, felt foolish. So I decided to treat it all as just work and interact with Eddie as if nothing had happened. But that evening, Eddie started sending a flurry of excuse-filled texts.
I didn't fall out of love with you. It was just bad timing that I met Catherine after meeting you. I should have just said I found someone I really liked and wanted to break up, but I kept putting it off because it was hard to say. I proposed on a whim and was regretting it. I feel relieved now that I've come clean. I hope we can pretend this never happened. It might affect my career if it gets out at the office. Let's continue being good colleagues like before.
I was so dismayed by Eddie's self-centeredness that I was speechless. Ignoring his messages made him call persistently after work.
Shy, you're listening to these voicemails, right? Why won't you answer? We didn't break off our engagement to become strangers, right? It feels lonely to be ignored. I just want to be friends like before. Call me back. It's just common courtesy for working adults.
Fed up, I showed the text to my mother and played her the voicemails to discuss what to do next. After making him wait for a week, when I finally answered his call, Eddie sounded delighted.
Shy, you finally answered. I thought you had blocked me.
Eddie, I want to visit your parents' house again.
That's a bit.
I proposed a plan to the hesitant Eddie. I want to return the engagement ring. And about this incident, I can write a statement saying I won't talk about it at work. Wouldn't that reassure your parents?
Okay, I'll ask my mom.
That evening, Eddie texted me. He agreed to let me visit his parents' house one last time. My mother and I prepared meticulously for the visit the following weekend. When we arrived, Catherine was already there. Seeing me, she looked shocked. Shy, why are you here?
I didn't invite Catherine,
Eddie said in a panic. I invited her. It's better if all involved are present. Catherine, you want to see me return Eddie's ring, don't you? I do want to see. Excuse me for interrupting. Catherine boldly entered, with Eddie and mother-in-law looking displeased, but father-in-law greeted her with a smile. Eddie and mother-in-law probably decided not to send Catherine away. They led my mother, Catherine, and me to the living room where it all happened. Mother-in-law, looking irritated, extended her palm towards me. Give back the diamond ring quickly. It was expensive. I took off the engagement ring and handed it to her. She snatched it and immediately put it in a jewelry case. Now write a statement that you won't talk about this nonsense at work. Can't trust a girl whose mother didn't even go to college. They put a pre-written statement and a pen on the table. My mother and I read it through, checking there was nothing odd, and then I signed it with my full name. You must have been after our money. Too bad for you. Shy, is that true? I thought you were poor because of your simple clothes and bags. Love marriages are doomed to fail. Catherine looked at my mother and me with disdain. Now leave, you're in the way.
Let's serve Catherine some fancy tea and desserts. Just wait a bit.
Okay, thank you so much. Father-in-law, already drinking wine in the afternoon, entertained Catherine in a tipsy state. Eddie watched happily. I couldn't help but smile and warned Catherine, Are you really planning to marry Eddie, Catherine? Oh, Shy, do you still have feelings for Eddie? He's so persistent. I laughed off Catherine's suspicious look. No way, just making sure. Divorce is harder than marriage, I hear.
Stop making trouble. It's just bad timing between you and me, remember?
I wanted to burst out laughing at Eddie's carefree attitude. I glared at Eddie and snapped. Timing? Who do you think you are saying that? Catherine, you better understand what you're getting into.
Enough. Just leave already.
As mother-in-law grabbed my arm, my IC recorder fell to the floor. It switched on from the impact, and Eddie's voice filled the room.
Elsie, I love you. Marry me.
Parents-in-law and Catherine froze. Okay, Eddie, you've had too much to drink. What if you pass out like yesterday?
Then I'll sleep on your lap. And you'll pat my head.
Sure, I'll do all that. Can I order almond too?
Yeah.
I want to drink Dom Perignon too.
Okay, order whatever you like.
Yay! You're such a generous future president, so wealthy. Ordering Dom Perignon black and almond. Catherine's face twisted in frustration. I know about those drinks from my part-time job in college. Both are incredibly expensive. No matter how much money you have, it's never enough if you drink like that.
Leave it alone. We have more than enough money.
So that's why you have a 9 p.m. curfew, Eddie. After dating me, you wanted to go to the bar. You pretended to report to your mom, but you were actually telling the bar girls what time you'd arrive. Sighing, I glanced at mother-in-law, who was shaking and pale. Eddie, you're still with that woman?
Well, Elsie is so cute.
Eddie pouted.
Elsie's got a rare disease. Her parents are missing, and she's working at the bar to put her younger brother through college. Isn't she a great person?
We were taken aback by Eddie's desperate explanation.
I have to support her.
That story is definitely a lie.
Shut up. Even if it's Catherine, I won't let anyone speak ill of her.
The usually calm Eddie raised his voice, shocking parents-in-law and Catherine. After a moment, Catherine covered her face with her hands, bursting into tears. How could you? I trusted you, Eddie.
Catherine.
We were going to get married after breaking up with Shy. You said that from the start. That's why I endured only seeing you on weekends. I never thought I'd be considered less than a bar girl.
Sorry, Catherine.
Eddie frantically tried to explain.
It's different. Elsie is like fandom. Some married people still like idols, right? That's what she is to me. Don't worry about it.
You say you love her? And how much money do you spend on her in a night? You planning to keep spending on her even after marriage? I can't accept this.
Eddie, don't make Catherine cry.
Please stop digging around, whether you hired a detective or not. I smirked at the bewildered parents-in-law. Better to expose the truth now than to have a bigger mess after marriage. It's kinder this way. Mother-in-law was at a loss for words, so I turned to Catherine. Catherine, Eddie is important to you, right? Or is it the money? Don't compare me to you, Catherine snapped back. Just the other day, I got a text from a coworker. After a drinking party, Catherine was bad-mouthing Eddie while drunk. Unfazed by Catherine's pallor, I showed the text to parents-in-law and Eddie. Catherine was trashing Eddie, calling him a frail rich boy, saying she's only flattering him for his money. After all, he taught her at work. Isn't that a bit harsh? Catherine looked relieved. That's not proof, just some coworker talking nonsense. Oh, you're just jealous because Eddie and I are close. Catherine retorted spitefully, then looked up at Eddie with teary eyes. I'm sorry I got jealous earlier. I love you, Eddie, and was scared you'd be taken by the bar girl.
I get it, Catherine. I love you the most, too.
Catherine and Eddie hugged tightly, with mother-in-law visibly relieved. But then father-in-law Alois interrupted.
And you said you loved me.
Mother-in-law and Eddie turned at the low muttering. Father-in-law, completely drunk, slammed his wineglass down on the table. You've had too much, Alois. Why don't you go rest in the back? Catherine tried to usher father-in-law to the back room, but he brushed her off and blurted out.
Catherine loves me. She's marrying me because she wants to be with me. Right, Catherine?
Catherine let out a small scream. Despite his drunken state, father-in-law fumbled with his mobile phone to show us the text screen. It was filled with hearts and kiss emojis. Alois, your grey hair is so distinguished and handsome.
Thanks. You're cute too, Catherine.
I've asked Eddie about living together after we marry, so I can see you every day.
I'll ask Mom about it too. Looking forward to it.
I find wine and whiskey boring with Eddie. I'm so happy our taste and alcohol match, Alois.
Yeah, let's have Mom make snacks and drink while watching sports.
Don't you drink with mother-in-law?
Drinking with an old woman is no fun. Drinking with a cute Catherine makes the booze taste 10 times better.
Oh, you, Alois. Following this exchange, mother-in-law went pale. Then her ears turned bright red. Just as I expected, I thought showing Catherine the co-worker's text would make her scramble to cover up. I figured if Catherine flaunted her affection for Eddie, the drunk father-in-law might slip up. Shy, you knew about this, Catherine asked me, surprised by my calm demeanor. A while ago, I saw you, Catherine, leaning on a middle-aged man at a bar. It was strange given how close she was with Eddie at work. But at the family meeting, when I realized the man was Alois, it all made sense.
Father?
What do you mean by this? Despite being glared at fiercely by mother-in-law and Eddie, father-in-law was unapologetic.
It's not an affair. Catherine and I share true love.
Don't joke. What do you take me for? Mother-in-law screamed furiously at my mother and me. Everything was fine until you two messed it all up. How are you going to take responsibility for this? Well, we haven't done anything wrong. My mother smiled gently as if to say, what a pickle. Mother-in-law then turned her fury on Eddie, still in shock. This is all because you fell for the wrong woman. Hey, you know the president, right? Get this woman fired.
Wonder if I can.
Alois, I also find Shy annoying. Can you get her fired?
Okay, I'll ask a president I know.
Catherine looked up at father-in-law with puppy eyes, and he agreed immediately. Mother-in-law gave father-in-law a piercing look. My mother and I exchanged glances and shrugged. Getting fired might be difficult, you know? I pulled out a business card, and parents-in-law Eddie and Catherine leaned in to see. They almost collapsed in shock. Is this?
The vice president of a major American corporation? Shy's mother? No way.
Their jaws dropped further when they saw a photo on my phone. It was no surprise, as the photo showed the president of a well-known company, often seen on TV and in newspapers, smiling and close to me. Shy, you're just an employee here. How are you so close to that company's president? I'm the same as Eddie. I joined our company to learn about society and business. I explained calmly. That company was started by my mother's ancestors. My aunt, my mother's sister, was the president, and when she retired, my mother took over. Eventually, I'm supposed to become the vice president. People often say that family-run businesses are lenient on their kin. That's why we made sure Shy had a solid experience outside our company. What? You're going to become president without even going to college? Ridiculous! Mother-in-law spat out in scorn, to which my mother responded in her calm tone. Don't you know? It's possible to learn business acumen without a college degree. After reading and studying on my own, I attended seminars and training programs and got various certifications. With a slight smile, my mother added, "You might want to stop looking down on people just because they didn't go to college. It might end up embarrassing you." Mother-in-law gritted her teeth in frustration, unable to respond. Eddie then voiced his doubt.
"But the house we had the family meeting in was old and small."
"Our main residence was under renovation. You know, the 1,000 square foot mansion near the station, right? We invited Eddie to our secondary residence." So Shai didn't approach Eddie for his wealth. I was raised with common sense so that it would be useful in my future work, right, Mom? Yes, I didn't want you to become someone who flaunts their wealth just because they're rich. It seemed parents-in-law and Eddie had no energy left to argue against my mother's subtle jab. "Eddie, father-in-law, and mother-in-law, if you make any more strange moves towards my daughter, I won't hesitate to crush your company. Please, be aware." With that final warning, my mother and I left Eddie's house. As soon as they learned about our family's wealth, parents-in-law and Eddie seemed to regret calling off the engagement.
"I broke up with Catherine. You're the most important to me. Let's start over. Your mom may not have gone to college, but she's a vice president, right? So my mom says it's okay to make an exception and marry you. I agree, too."
Eddie sent such ridiculous texts, so I immediately blocked him. Conveniently, a position opened up in the sales department, so I requested a transfer there. Eddie's family fell into chaos when father-in-law and Catherine's near affair led mother-in-law to slap divorce papers on father-in-law. Later, Catherine declared in front of mother-in-law that she intends to marry father-in-law, sending mother-in-law into a rage. However, father-in-law insisted they were just drinking buddies, prompting mother-in-law to hire a detective to gather evidence of their affair. Taking my mother's word seriously, mother-in-law embezzled company funds in a bid to claim them before being crushed. However, suspicious behavior led the company executives to investigate, and her embezzlement was quickly discovered. Additionally, Eddie was caught misusing company funds multiple times. After a huge dispute among relatives, parents-in-law's company actually went under. Oh dear, what a mess. But it's none of our business. My mother commented nonchalantly while reading the local newspaper. Later, mother-in-law and Eddie were sued by relatives, but settled by paying compensation. Rumors of embezzlement spread in the company, making Eddie uncomfortable and leading to his resignation. Now, he no longer frequents bars and stays at home. I've become good friends with my colleagues in the sales department, and I'm enjoying my days, focusing on my career rather than romance. It seems I'm better suited to pursuing my career than love. I wanted to ease my mother's mind about settling down, but I've decided not to rush it anymore. If I encounter a chance for love again, I'll carefully assess the person's character, not just their appearance or vibe.